Good morning. You guys hear me okay? Wow, talk about pressure. She said Jose wasn't here and the whole crowd went, "Aw." I'm like, "Oh man, I hope they want to hear from me." Jeez. I feel so emotional for so many reasons. That introduction was amazing, and I'm sitting there thinking, is she talking about me? Little old me, my mom had me at 15 years old, and I was born at the steps of her high school during summer school, and I just thank you so much. I am so humbled, and sometimes you have to step back and appreciate who you are and what you are as we engage in the work that we do, right? A lot of us are health care providers, social workers, foster parents, teachers, and if we don't take time to look within and look at ourselves and appreciate ourselves, we can't make ourselves whole to serve the youth and the children and the families that we are. So thank you so much for humbling me today, and that gives me the energy to continue working towards making our youth, who are the future of this country, regardless of what happened last night. So thank you. And George said so many things that I was sitting there bobbing my head and saying, yes, 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 George for president, yes. And education is truly the key to success. And it does take a village. I grew up without a father. You don't need a father. You need someone that cares and truly invests in you to make you whole, to make a difference. And so thank you so much for those comments. And Verse 5 is truly blessed to have you behind the wheel to push this forward, because this will change violence. When you think about youth in education and the brain development, and George talked about the first 3 months and the comparison between a child who's had someone talk to them in their brain development and then at 5 years old and 10 years old, I truly believe that's where violence comes from. Violence is a health issue. It is an issue because there's no conflict resolution, there is no brain development so that people learn to use their words rather than a gun or a knife to resolve conflict. And if we can educate ourselves and talk and read and sing and engage and empower, we will have a huge impact on violent crime in some of the communities that a lot of you serve. So thank you for looking at it in that regard. And I think that law enforcement, now more than ever, really needs to partner with entities like Verse 5 to send that message that it is a health issue. And to break that cycle of violence, you need to have education. So thank you so much. So I usually don't use notes, but I'm in a room of like some smart, amazing people, so I made notes, and it's so uncomfortable for me because I've never gone off notes, so bear with me. I've been with Los Angeles Police Department now for almost 22 years, and I was born and raised in South LA. And in 2009, when crime was at its highest in Watts, we have public housing developments in Watts. So how many of you are familiar with South Los Angeles and Watts? Oh, very good. We're familiar with the Watts riots and the violence. And there was a 10-year period from 2002 to 2011 where there were 70 murders in 3 of the public housing developments in Watts. So we were averaging about 7 murders a year for 10 years. And law enforcement looked at this and said, what can we do to break this cycle and make a change and do something different to empower the youth so that they don't continue this violence? And one of the first things that I said is law enforcement has to apologize to the community for the way that it has responded and treated the community. And we have to ask for forgiveness. And even if it wasn't me, I was born in 1970 and I came on LAPD in 1995, and I understand the history and the matter and the means in which police officers were working in low socioeconomic communities, and it wasn't pretty. So I was apologizing not for myself, but for what my uniform and my badge represented to the community. And then once we were able to say we're sorry and ask for forgiveness, then we opened up the lines of communication. And you have to do that with honesty and a pure heart, and a need and an urge to want to understand what the community needs so that the children don't have to grow up in these violent communities. And once we said we're sorry and we began to listen, we were able to build relationships. And one of the things that I did in 2009 was I adopted a school, 99th Street Elementary School. And it's in the heart of Watts, and Principal Sherry Williams, her reading scores were down. There were fights on campus. There were shootings down the street. And I was looking for a way to engage the youth and get them to want to trust us. So I took the police officers out of uniform, and I went to the principal and I said, hey, we want to adopt this school. We want to come in and we want to read to your kindergartners and first graders. And she thought, well, I don't know if I want you guys on campus. They don't like you too much around here, but I need help. So I'll take what I can get, right? And so the first 2 weeks we were on campus, the kids literally were screaming and running away from us, saying, they're going to arrest us, they're going to take me, they're going to arrest us. And the officers came back to me and they said, Sergeant T, this isn't going to work. They hate us. And I said, you know what, guys? It took us more than 100 years to get in this mess. It's going to take us a couple hundred years to get out of this mess. So we're going to keep going at it, and we're not going to give up. And the more we went every Friday and read to these kids, we started to build a relationship with these children. The first couple of times we picked out the book and we told them what we were going to read. And after 2 to 3 months, they started picking out the books and meeting us at the door and saying, here's what I want you to read to me today, officer. And then they started giving nicknames to the police officers. They weren't officers anymore. One of our officers was a football player, so they called him Officer Buff. One of our officers was a track runner, so they called her Speedy. Hi, Speedy. Hi, Officer Speedy. So we started to build this relationship. And we tackled two things. And one was that we took officers out of responding to the violence that they see every day. And the purpose was for the officers to begin to humanize the children and the youth and see them no different than our kids. And they're not responding to an emergency. They're in a stable environment, and they're humanizing with these children. And the purpose of me doing that, too, was to change the culture of how we work in police in these communities. So it was a win-win for both. And after 2 years, the fights on campus went down. We built relationships with the students. We started programs like Donuts with Dads and Muffins with Moms, where we invited the dads to come on campus and read and have donuts. We didn't eat the donuts, people. I'm just saying. We had croissants. But the kids wanted the donuts. And that allowed us to begin to interact with the parents. It is truly empowering when a parent, think about this. A lot of the families that live in the public housing developments, they do not even have a high school diploma. But we have First Five who's educating and telling young mothers and parents to talk, read, and sing. Well, if I'm a parent and I never had that foundation, that's intimidating to me. What does that mean? How do I do that? I don't know how to read. I don't know how to write. But what I do know is I want something better for my child. And if all I have to do is sing Spanish music to him or dance or make him laugh, I don't need a resource to do that. I can do that on my own. And that's empowering as a parent, right? Just sing. My voice is horrible. But I have 6 children total, 2 of my own, 4, long story. I'm a stepmom. There's 6 of us now. It's a crazy family. And I read and I sang and I talked to my children all the time. My daughter's 14 now and I can't shut her up. I'm like, oh my goodness. So it is truly empowering. So once we began to work with the community and read to the kids, we started doing other things centered around education. We started doing safe passage because violence was so rampant along the thoroughfares to get to school. Kids were getting robbed, they were getting their cell phones, we call it, they were getting pocket checked, they were being challenged by gang members. And I thought if we're making it safe on campus because we're there, we've got to make it safe for the kids to get to school. The attendance rate was so low because Children were afraid to even walk to school because of what they'd have to encounter on their way to school. And then think about this. If you're in a community where violent crime is up, there are no sit-down restaurants, there's one grocery store that doesn't have the best produce, every other store is a liquor store or fast food or a church, how do you thrive, right? And so you had a shooting last night, the helicopter kept you up all night because it was buzzing around, so you're tired, you haven't eaten because mom may have been out prostituting or not home and you've been on your own, and then I have to get to school and sit in a classroom and learn? How does a teacher teach a child who just heard a shooting last night and no one's addressed his post-traumatic stress or what he's feeling? And then I've got to sit in a classroom and learn and get prepared to take tests and meet the requirements of what the state needs for the schools to be successful. That's a huge challenge. And then what type of help is there or resources are there for the teachers who have to teach these children? And so part of what we did was meet with the teachers, take them on a tour through the community, explain to them where the gangs were, let them see the environment that the children are living in so that they can help better serve the youth in their classrooms. And a lot of the teachers had no idea of what was really going on in the community. And so we also changed the way that the teachers looked at the community. And we started to build relationships with the teachers. So it takes a village, right? It takes a village to raise a family. If you have law enforcement working in conjunction with teachers, working in conjunction with nonprofit organizations, and when you do it with a holistic approach, you will literally change the cycle of violence and trauma in a community. And that's what we are attempting to do. And I think the last thing I want to bring up, and I hope that you guys know this, it's been very controversial times for law enforcement right now. I work in South Los Angeles at 77th Street Division, right in the heart of South LA. And I know that me being an officer and working in a community that lives in fear, that we can't do it ourselves. We can't do it alone. We truly need partnerships. And part of that partnerships are a lot of you sitting in this room. We have a DART card, Domestic Assault Response Team, where a police officer rides with a clinician and they respond to domestic violence calls. That's a partnership. We have a mental evaluation unit, MEU, where an officer rides out with a clinician when we get calls for mentally ill or violent male or female, and they can handle it better than we can. That's partnerships. We now are on campus, we're doing reading programs. We started football teams, we're working with the Girl Scouts, we're working with Kaiser, USC, UCLA, we're doing tutoring. We've really focused on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, where we utilize some of the funds from our Community Safety Partnership Program to bus students to STEM so that they can get an education outside of the resources that they have at school. We partnered with Sunburst Youth Academy, and they started a STEM school, and the school said, we don't have money to bus these kids. Well, is that my responsibility as an LAPD cop to bus kids to get them to get an education? If it's changing the environment, then it is my responsibility. And a lot of people say, you don't belong in the classrooms, you're not a social worker, you're a police officer. Well, I can tell you this. For several years, we tried it so many ways. We suppressed the community, we kicked in doors, we made hundreds of arrests and put people in prison in a system that's broken, and none of it worked. We're now working with nonprofit organizations, we're understanding the culture and the history of the communities that we're working in, and violent crime in South LA is reduced every day because of that. And so, everyone in this room plays a part in that. When you look at the jobs that you do, you probably don't think that indirectly you're reducing crime. But I'm telling you that you are. You are empowering young children to stand up and say, I don't want to put a gun in my hand. I don't want to join a gang. I'm going to get an education and make something better of my life. So if we can reduce crime through talking and reading and singing and brain development, I think we're on to something, folks. And every one of you in this room has taken a part in that. And I really, truly would love for you guys to get in touch with your local law enforcement agencies, find out if we can do grants together, find out what we can do to work together. Because the more of us that there is to prove that this is the way to reduce crime and not build more prisons, I think this country will be better off.
I told you she was wonderful. She and I are going to go sit, and I have a couple questions I want to ask her. So we're not quite done with her yet. So
You guys hear me? Yeah.
okay. All right. So one of the burning questions I have for you, I mean, you've accomplished so much, and you've changed lives and your community, but how did you get there? Who inspired you to have a life in law enforcement? What was the inspiration for that?
I'd have to say my grandmother and my mom. Imagine being a parent at 15 and not even understanding how to change a diaper, or, she had no prenatal care. So it's just a miracle that I was born anyway, so I was destined to be a spaz, right? And so, but my mother continued her education, and she went on to become a nurse practitioner in OBGYN for Kaiser Permanente. And yes. And she then went on to get her master's degree, and as a young child, I watched her, and I remember her not being home. She would work 11 at night to 7 in the morning and then go to school, and I was literally raising myself. But she was so loving and so committed, and I knew that I wanted to be like her one day. My grandmother started off as a deputy sheriff, and then she taught for 38 years. And that inspired me. And so I think that I know that I got to where I am today because my grandmother and my mother continued their education, and they didn't let the environment that I was born in take control of my life. And at a young age, I learned that education is the key to success and moving up and moving on.
Wow. There was a different question I was going to ask you, but after having dinner with you last night, you know what I'm going to ask you. So you saw in the ad, there's a shot of Emada standing in between Michelle Obama and Dr. Jill Biden, because, as we said, she was at the State of the Union address in 2015, but almost got arrested while she was there. Do you want to tell that story? How does one get to the White House? We want to live vicariously through you, because now there's probably no chance I'll ever get asked there. So.
I don't think I will either. Wow, okay, so. Okay, great question. I'm going to embarrass myself. Okay, let me start with the first answer first. So we were taking a tour of the White House, and I mean, can you imagine, first of all, I only had 26 minutes to get dressed because I was touring Washington, D.C., and just so humbled by being there and the history and going to all the monuments that we looked at our watch, and I literally had 26 minutes to get ready and get to the White House. And who's late to the White House, right? So I was so stressed about that. But we got it. Once we got to the White House, we got a tour, and we were in Eleanor Roosevelt's room. There's a room just dedicated to her. And there were all these beautiful old tea sets and these sofas, and it was going to be a while until we got ushered into the next room. So I was on heels. I'm a tomboy, guys. I'm a police officer, right? Like heels is out of the question. So I was like, I'm gonna rest my feet. So I sat down on something I wasn't supposed to sit down on. It was like a chair that she used to sit in. And one of the aides comes up to me and she says, oh, please stand up. Honey, you can't sit on that. And I jumped up so fast thinking, oh my God, don't hit any of the tea sets. These are like 2,000 years old. Like what's? So yeah, that was really embarrassing. But I felt good to know that she says I wasn't the only one that's done that. Like hundreds of people have done it, which made me feel really good. But I doubt it. I think she just said that to make me feel good. So I was truly honored to get the invitation to go to the State of the Union address. And I just recently have learned that I believe it happened because of the work that we were doing in Watts. There was a community activist who at one time had a great disdain for law enforcement and a lack of trust. And over the years, we were able to build trust and build a relationship. And he knew someone that was working at the White House, and they were asking about law enforcement who were really on the cutting edge, who were doing something different in the community, because the president was working on the 21st century policing model and looking for ideas. And the Community Safety Partnership Program was brought to the attention of the White House, and they started doing some research on it. And the next thing we know, my husband's phone rang, and this conversation is being recorded. We're asking you not to share this information, but we are inviting you to go to the White House, and you can't tell anybody. So I thought, he's lying. There's no way. So then a couple of weeks later, another phone call comes in, and this is being recorded and the whole deal, and we get invited to go to the State of the Union. And we couldn't tell our family until the day before the White House was going to put out who the guests were at the State of the Union. So I felt so uncomfortable being invited because it's not about me. I really believe that we were invited on behalf of the community, and we can't invite the whole community to go. So I was truly honored to represent South Los Angeles, specifically the Watts community, because it's a community that has been forgotten. It's the community that has been known for the Watts riots and businesses leaving and gangs and drugs and the crack cocaine epidemic. And for that community to rise out of the ashes and empower themselves and willing to accept our apology and begin to break down the barriers and build bridges with law enforcement to move forward to truly change the dynamics of that community is huge. And so that invite was on behalf of that community who truly is working to educate themselves and strive and make that community a better place.
Thank you so much for sharing that story with us. So I'm going to join everybody here and give you another round of applause. And thank you for being such an outstanding ambassador for First 5.
Thank you.